Hey, welcome back to another video. I'm actually really excited. First of all, because I'm sipping on some coffee. Second of all, because I'm sampling into the OctaTrack. The OctaTrack has been really fun, especially when it comes down to sampling. This thing is about 10 to 12 years old, so it's not new technology, but something about this sampler that's just really pleasing when it comes down to slicing records. So that's what I want to go into right now with you, show you guys what it could do, what it cannot do. There's actually two different ways of sampling or slicing up your samples, and that's what I want to go over with you today. So let's jump right in and have some fun. Now my setup right here, I'm actually coming out of my record player going into inputs A and B. The OctaTrack has a total of 4 inputs, and it also has a total of 4 outputs, a total of 8 tracks. 8 tracks for me is more than enough. I've mentioned this before, but I typically only use sample, drums, and bass. To me, that's more than enough for me to put out music. As a matter of fact, that's probably the only elements that I use. Before I do start sampling and slicing up samples, let me throw a drum break into this sequence because I want to make sure we have like a drum loop playing in the background once we slice up those samples so we can play with that. I'm going to go into track number 2 and I'm going to jump into my sample pack. This is actually sample pack volume 1. There's some really cool drum breaks in volume 1. So I'm going into volume 1 and let's load this one up right here. And let's hit record, put that in the first trigger. And let's set the tempo, do 70 beats per minute. Right here we have a drum loop, just a 4 or 1 bar drum loop. Now we'll go back into track number 1. And before I start sampling into track number 1, I want to make sure track number 1 is a flex track. Once we select that flex track, let's go into record buffer 1, hit yes, get out of that. Now we're ready to sample into track number 1. I'm going to my sampling settings and make sure that A and B is active. So when I sample in, it's getting a signal from inputs A and B. One thing to keep in mind is that the OctaTrack has a total of 16 seconds. It limits you to 16 seconds. There is a way you could go into your menu and expand those 16 seconds to, I'm not sure, but I would keep it at 16 seconds because I feel like 16 seconds is more than what I usually will use. Or the other option is if you actually just load up samples into your CFast card that comes with the OctaTrack, you could load up an entire song. All right, so now that we have that 16-second sample into track number 1, we go into our audio editor. Going into our audio editor, you got different options. You got your trim, you got your slice, and then you got your edit. Trim will just do exactly what it's saying. You could trim your start point, your end point. You got your loop setting right here. And at the bottom in encoder D, you could zoom in or out. Actually, it just expands the audio wave file so you could see it a little better. Encoder D allows you to scroll left or right. And encoder F allows you to zoom in or zoom out. This is actually really, really fun to slice up samples. In order for me to play back this sample, I just hit function yes. And I'm just listening to where I want to start my downbeat. I'm actually going to start right here. That's going to be my start. And my end, I'm going to just keep it rolling. I'm not really selecting a perfect 2 or 4 bar loop. I'm just selecting my start point. I'm going to go to my editor and I'm going to hit yes. It gives me some options. What do I want to do? I want to crop that selection. So that's pretty much just truncating whatever is on your left-hand side and on your right-hand side, keeping you with what you have selected. Once we have that selection, I'm going to go into slice mode. And when I go into the slice page, there's 2 different ways that you can slice up your records. You could just sample a record that's 1 bar sample or 2 bars. So when you're sampling into the OctaTrack, you'll be counting in your head. There's, hey, you know what? I'm going to sample 2 bars, which 2 bars will give you a total of 8 beats. 8 beats. If you go into slice mode, you could add and create a slice grid. If you hit slice grid, you could tell it, hey, how many beats are in that sample you've selected? There's 8 slices. Hit yes, and it just chops it up for you. You got your end point, your start point, pretty much selected for you. That's a very fast way to sample, and I will show you guys after this method. But right now, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna just manually start adding slices wherever I feel there should be a slice. So I'm gonna hit yes, and I'm gonna go all the way up to where it says add slice here, hit yes, and I just dropped in my first slice. If I zoom in and I hit function yes, it just plays that slice. I can just extend my endpoint Like, how long do I want this slice to be? I'm actually gonna zoom in and just select a couple stabs right here. Now, here's the catch when it comes down to manual slice mode. You would assume that once you selected your start and end point of that first slice, it automatically will give you the second slice. But that's actually not the case. You actually have to go to this first encoder right here, and you gotta get out of that selection you've made, as you guys can see. Right here, when it shows the white side, white side is my first slice. But if I get out of that slice, now I'm into a new empty space. What do I want to do in that empty space? I actually want to add another slice. Hit yes, and it says add slice here. Hit yes again. Now you got your second slice right here. I just have to select the start point of this slice, and then I have to select the end point. That's fine right there. I zoom in and I get out of that selection and I add another slice. Now, this might seem tedious to some people, and you know what? It kind of is. But like I mentioned, I do enjoy sitting down and taking my time when it comes down to selecting my slices. Might not be for everybody, but it's something that I'm very comfortable with. It's not a deal breaker for me. And now, another thing to keep in mind is that these slices that I'm doing are not destructive, meaning if I don't have a perfect selected start and end point, I can always go back and readjust the start and end point once I'm playing around with my drums. All right, so I just went ahead and added those slices manually. I just want to now go on track number 1 and make sure I have track number 1 into a slice track. Hit function, down arrow, and now I'm selected on slice mode. You got different types of tracks that you could select from, but right now we want to access those slices. Make sure you're on slice mode, and then I'm gonna double tap source. And when I double tap source, it gives me some options about this track. I'm gonna turn on slices, and it has time stretch. I want to turn off time stretch. And on your loop mode, I'm going to turn on ping pong looping, which is actually really cool to get rid of some clicks and pops. Get out of that page. Once we're out of that page, you will see that these triggers turned green. Every green trigger is actually a slice that we added that when we were just chopping up the sample. So we actually have those slices right here. What's really cool is that once, my way of slicing up samples, as soon as I'm done slicing up a sample, I like to pitch up or down. So having that axis right at my fingertips is really good. If I am in track 1, source page, I can pitch this up or down. Oh, there you go. Let's hit play and listen to how this sounds with the drums. You can actually perform live your performance. I just want to make sure I turn on my metronome and actually give myself a 1 bar count in. Go to my project, make sure that is active, and make sure pre-roll set to 1 bar. There you go. That's the 1 bar loop that I have right there. If I want to do 2 bars, that's just 1 bar. It's very repetitive. I could just hold function page and just page over to 32 steps, which is going to be 2 bars. Get out of record. It just copied everything in bar 1 and pasted it to bar 2. If I want to actually get rid of what I had in bar 2, and let's actually continue recording into bar 2 after bar 1. There you go. All right, so cool, just like that. As a matter of fact, I'm actually gonna go into track number 3. Let's add a bass line into this track. All right, so that's one way to add your slices manually, but here's a different method that I actually enjoy a little bit more. I'm actually gonna go to an empty track. Let's go into track 5, make sure that one is a flex track, and let's go into buffer 5, and let's actually select this different song right here. I'm gonna select the start and end point of where I want this loop to be placed at. right here. This is gonna be my downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. All right. Cool, so I have a selection of 16 beats. There's 16 beats in this selection. I'm gonna go into my edit, hit yes, and I'm gonna discard everything from the left and the right-hand side, so I have that selected right there. Again, there's 16 beats in that selection. I'm gonna go into my slice mode. Since I know there's 16 beats in that selection because I counted that, I'm gonna go and hit yes, and I'm actually, in this way, I'm not gonna add slices manually. I'm gonna go into create slice grid, hit yes, and how many slices do you want this thing to create? I want to select 16 because there were 16 beats that I counted. Hit yes, and it says, are you sure? Once you have that selected, now as you can see, it's created 16 slices for you. If you hit function yes, you can play back those slices. Since I selected that loop that has 16 beats in there and I did a perfect selection of that loop, it made my slices for me pretty good. If some of those slices are a little off, I can always go back and readjust those. But for right now, I'm gonna keep it the way it sliced it up for me. I'm gonna hit no. And I wanna make sure track number 5 is actually a slice track. Go to source, make sure slice is turned on, time stretch is turned off. I'm gonna select ping pong loop. And now we'll see that we have our 16 slices right here. I'm gonna pitch this, we can go ahead and pitch this down. Let's go to about 4 and let's mute track 1 and let's just hear those drums and see what we have right here. I'm gonna go from 70 beats per minute. I'm gonna go up to 80 beats per minute. I feel like 80 beats per minute will be a little better. One thing to keep in mind is that those drums, they're actually a time stretch is turned on. So now that I'm going up to 80 beats per minute, the time stretch will put that drum break up to 80 beats per minute. So it should be playing pretty good. Yeah. I'm actually feeling that loop right there. Yeah. And I'm actually gonna come up with a bass. I'm gonna clear what we had for beat number 1 and see what we come up with right here. Let's go back into our chromatic mode. There's something about the sampling blending in with the creative side of sequencing a beat that's very powerful for me. And I've tried different samplers. A lot of samplers that I've tried, I just don't even make videos on because I don't know, I don't like the workflow of it. If you guys know, I use a lot of MPCs and that's my favorite workflow. But when I picked up the OctaTrack, this is a completely different style for me to chop up samples, but something about the blend of slicing and the creative mindset that I have, it works, it clicks with me. And yes, the MPC for me is a lot faster. It's newer technology, but even though it's newer technology, there's something about this connection that I have with chopping up samples and using the creative side within me that I have fun.